we're not anti-trans. That's not the focus of the magazine. It's a magazine for women by women. And we define women and lesbians in particular as adult human females who love other adult human females. But it still shocks me that that is a controversial statement in this day and age. So, anyway, the point I was trying to make was that the magazine isn't just about the hard stuff, and we're certainly not, an anti-trans magazine. But we do, like, we're not afraid to define lesbians as they are. And but the magazine includes lots of other stuff too. That's just fun. Like there's some playlists and book reviews, movie reviews. So there's a little bit of something for everyone. It's a real variety.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ariane from LGB Alliance USA, and I am here with the editors of Jill Magazine, a magazine by and about lesbians, butches, femmes, and dykes, and their female allies. We have interviewed Vera before around the time the first issue was released, and we'll put a link to that interview in the show notes. We recommend that you check that out to familiarize or refamiliarize yourself with the story behind Jill Magazine. Now, a second issue of Jill is about to come out. And joining us for the first time is Vera's colleague, DK. And I was just wondering, DK, how did you first get involved with Jill?
Mm. You know, I must have seen something on Twitter or Instagram, and there was a link if you want to get involved. And as someone who spent the first half of their working life working in print publishing and also having peaked, it seemed like it could be a good fit because I do have expertise in the area of print publishing. And this was a print magazine, it wasn't online, it wasn't strictly online. So it seemed like something I might be able to do or help out with. And I think there was a link, and I followed it, and I wrote something which apparently Vera found compelling, and here's where we're at now.
And thank God she did. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a second issue.
Yeah, maybe that segues nicely into how, when the first issue came out, what was the reception? What made you think, consider your decision, maybe we should do a second one?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I guess when the first issue came out, I was kind of hungry for something that spoke to me because, our lesbian spaces are sort of disappearing or being absorbed largely, certainly in Canada, and I know in the US as well, and we're hearing that around the world, have sort of become absorbed into the queer community, which doesn't always include, actual lesbians. So I was sort of hungry for the type of magazine that Jill is, and I couldn't find it anywhere, so I decided to make it myself. And it was just really neat to meet so many women who were interested in contributing and telling their stories or hearing about the stories of other lesbians. And so that first issue, I'm not a marketing specialist, so it really was just sort of whatever I threw up on social media and then other people helping out. The first issue, the print run was 250, and we've sold about 200 of them just kind of through word of mouth. People were able to make a donation through a GoFundMe link, or if it was easier for them, through e-transfer or PayPal. And then I initially, and then DK, when she joined in, started just mailing them out to people by hand through the post office. And so that's kind of how that's been. And the reception's been really good. People, I think women who are reading the magazine are telling others about it. More folks are hearing about it. Initially, I knew we had a good solid 50 to 100 subscribers, if you will. So I took a bit of a risk by printing 250 because I didn't know if they would all sell. But by the time DK came on board, I had sold, I guess, about 150, 175. And since then, as we've, sort of started to have more of a presence online, more people are hearing about the magazine and joining our mailing list, which is how you find out how to get the next one, by the way, as an aside. And more people are buying whatever's left of the remaining issues. So I think we'll be, I think we're down to like 20 copies left of that first issue. So I think we'll have no problem sharing those. I think people weren't expecting what they got. I think once they got the magazine in hand, the original one, and I have a copy here, if people haven't seen it, it's this sort of high color, glossy, lots and lots of pictures, There's a centerfold too. We won't show that online, but there's a couple of statistical articles as well as just more fun stuff. There's a word search going to be in the next one, and some trivia. There's some, fiction stories, all kinds of stuff. And so I think people were pleasantly surprised once they got the magazine in their hands, and that's how word of mouth sort of spread. And so I'll say for myself, when we finished with the first issue, I kind of thought, phew, okay, well, that was a big job. That's done. On to some other fun project. And then we had a few people respond to the call for help, including DK, amongst others. And with her publishing background and her enthusiasm, I thought, all right, we'll do another issue. And so here we are now. And now that attitude for sure is gone from me. Her enthusiasm was very infectious. And I think other women and lesbians have picked up on that. And I'm super excited about our upcoming issue. I think it's going to be very well received. It's even better than the first one, if you can imagine. Certainly more professionally laid out now that we have an actual person who knows about publishing on our volunteer board. But even the content, I think there's some really great content going to be coming up in the second issue. And
since you brought up how helpful DK has been, if DK, when you joined, was there like a particular words of wisdom that you could offer to the magazine based on your experience that was like, oh wow, it would, this is really what you should be doing?
yeah, while she's thinking, I'll tell you what sticks out for me. She said, don't use 17 different font types. But of course,
Yes.
I was just playing with the layout online with our original printer. So, I'm a little ADHD. So I really like this font, and also this one and that one too, and this one over here. So that would be one very concrete piece. I think that DK has brought this next issue will look a lot more cohesive, I think, in that sense.
And I think that the photo qualities, or the quality of the new photos that are going to be in this one, are really high and really varied. Fonts definitely are more cohesive. There's less of them. And it just has a more structured look, but still fun and visually very appealing. Really had some fun putting it together. Hasn't always been easy, but I think it's really something.
One of the things that's kind of neat about just having one issue per year is we're not stuck about getting the latest news. There's lots of that on social media now anyway. I mean, newspapers themselves and journals have almost become redundant because the news cycle's so fast. So the thing with the magazine is it's more about telling lesbian stories. And the feedback we heard from the first issue is that readers really liked that. They wanted to hear about real women in their own country or another country who were lesbians, butch, dyke, femme, however they, identified themselves in the lesbian umbrella. And their stories, how they met, coming out stories, what's happening with them. And so one of the big features this issue, I guess our big reveal, we won't say who, but we've got 4 different contributors who have shared their stories of detransition, because that is becoming, I think, an area that's increasingly of concern to to the gay community in general, but the lesbian community in particular, as a lot of women, and especially young women, although some older as well, have sort of been sucked into that or pulled into that whole transition and that trans movement, that gender ideology movement. Now enough time has passed that we're seeing people starting to detransition. And although there are some resources online for detransitioners, it's still a pretty hush-hush topic in the broader community. And, we want to make sure, first of all, that these women have a place to tell their story, but also that the broader lesbian community is aware that this is happening, and that maybe once trans doesn't mean always trans, and that there are women among us who are desperately trying to find their way back, and how we can sort of welcome them back into the lesbian community, whatever that even means, into the lesbian community with open arms. And of course, some of our younger readers or readers struggling with gender dysphoria, body dysmorphia, that sort of thing, to help them hear a broader story, rather than that sort of mainstream narrative that unfortunately is still being pushed about, the only way forward is to cut off breasts and start taking hormones that, are counter to your sex, your biological sex, and that sort of thing. So I'm really excited about that section of the magazine. The magazine isn't all about detrans, but there is a significant component this issue. And with the 4 different writers, it's a nice sort of comprehensive picture, I think, that we'll be presenting.
We're also including some history because so many of the younger folks, the history's been erased and they don't know what went on. We lived through those times. We remember a lot of it, but the younger folks are being told a very different story, not necessarily a true story.
Yeah, and that's something I
So
think we'd like to do sort of for all the issues. Like we were very lucky. This issue, we have a Canadian lesbian who worked, actually an older Canadian lesbian who worked with a younger friend of hers to kind of put together a fairly comprehensive Western Canadian history of lesbian history in particular, not just queer gay history. And there's also that there's a piece from an American from the United States who put together a piece just about some of the archives and places in the US that you can find some of that history. Our previous issue, we had a piece from somebody in the UK who was, and from New Zealand too, who wasn't talking about history specifically, but talking a little bit about what's happening there. So we're very open and welcoming of anybody, any woman, any lesbian or female ally who wants to contribute. So for future issues, if somebody's interested, you don't have to be from Canada or the US to share, but we want to document some of that history and some of those stories of our history as lesbians around the world.
and we have a great team of proofreaders and editors and fact checkers who help polish things up. You don't have to be a great writer, but if you have something to say that will help the community going forward or finding its feet, this is a good place to do that.
I was actually just about to ask if you've had any feedback or you've had any buyers from people outside of North America.
Yes, as a matter of fact, a big supportive group, I would say for me, especially last year when I was starting out, was a group of lesbians largely from the UK. So we've had contributors from the UK. We have one readers and contributors from the Netherlands this year. We're featuring a piece on a couple that's a nice lesbian couple and their dog that have quite an age gap. So we thought that was a fun little story. One of our writers, one of our femme photographers she lives in Berlin in Germany, she and her partner. And so we've got a little story on them. Last issue, we had something from New Zealand and Australia. I don't think we do this issue. So that would be a great reach out if, maybe through LGB International, if people hear about us. There are lesbians out there from down under. We want you. We want you in our magazine. Your pictures, your stories, your poetry, your art. Send us whatever you have.
Yes, we definitely want to make better connections with the folks in New Zealand and Australia.
Yeah.
So,
Because there's a lot of
definitely.
exciting stuff happening down there. There's a big court case going on right now, again, with just listening to a podcast about that, the definition of woman and all the same sorts of things. Everyone's fighting all over the place. So we need to support each other and learn from each other and just celebrate each other and enjoy each other too. I mean, one of the interesting things about Jill Magazine is certainly here where I live in Canada, I've gotten a lot of flack from the queer community. DK always jokes that I'm a known turf and what is it? A KT,
AT, yeah.
because of the magazine. Some folks found out about it and, I've gotten a really hard time about it. And I'm always kind of flabbergasted by that because we're not anti-trans. That's not the focus of the magazine. It's a magazine for women by women. And we define women and lesbians in particular as adult human females who love other adult human females. But it still shocks me that is a controversial statement in this day and age. So, anyway, the point I was trying to make was that the magazine isn't just about the hard stuff, and we're certainly not, an anti-trans magazine. But we're not afraid to define lesbians as they are. And but the magazine includes lots of other stuff too. That's just fun. Like there's some playlists and book reviews, movie reviews. So there's a little bit of something for everyone. It's a real variety.
Yeah, I got the first edition of Jill magazine and I noticed, wow, this isn't really like what I would call a political magazine. It had so much, just fun anecdotes about, my story as a lesbian pilot or There was some short fiction and that sort of thing. I'm like, if this were this could have this it felt sort of maybe like a retro 90s, like this is just, lesbians.
Reader's Digest for lesbians.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you'd have to be really super sensitive to like read this, and the first thing on your mind is, "Wow, these are a bunch of mean turfs," you know? It's
I
amazing
know.
how people
Well,
nitpick on that
it's
sort of thing.
interesting. I thought, I'm still a bit naive, I guess. I thought the same thing. I thought, if people just see the magazine and read it, they'll see how harmless it is. So foolishly, I brought a few copies with me last month, or maybe it was the month before, to a Rainbow Elders group here in the town near where I live. And I actually got a letter from the director of the organization afterwards asking me not to come back because of my ongoing anti-trans advocacy, among other things, of which bringing a lesbian magazine to a meeting that includes lesbians apparently is anti-trans advocacy. So
Yeah, it was really brutal. I
that's the
saw the
world we're
letter.
living
It
in.
was incredibly brutal. Yeah.
Well, speaking of brutality, if you don't mind sharing, DK, you had quite a story about your employment saga
Yes.
when it has to do with this issue, if you'd like to share.
And I also have been expunged from the Rainbow Elders group in my county. I worked as an administrative assistant for an agency that is federally and state funded, and it brings services to elders so that they can stay in their homes for as long as possible to try to minimize the impact on the medical system. And I worked for the department which has the most hands-on, the largest department of this organization. And after I peaked, I just kind of kept my head down, I was asked to march in the Pride parade with the organization in 2024. They really wanted me up front and center because of my visual appearance.
You look a little
And
bit gay.
I know, crazy, isn't it? Um, I felt like the figurehead on a ship, right? And I didn't want to do it. And that didn't sit well with the new director. And in this office complex where I worked, where the agency had their offices, we had a big common lunchroom, and we would just wander off of our offices and go and have lunch there. And folks were talking about the new administration and how awful it was and all this terrible stuff. And I piped up and I said, yeah, but that executive order, I am so grateful for it. And again, off the clock, not in the office. And then I went, clocked back in, got back to my desk. Within 2 days, I was called into HR and fired. They didn't want to hear my story. 2 of the employees had gone to their supervisor, who is trans supportive, let's say. And that person went directly to the director. And at first I was told, well, we don't have the same, what is it that they always say?
Your philosophy doesn't align with
Yeah,
the
something
company.
like that. Yes,
Yeah.
you don't, it doesn't match with us anymore. And I was like, what are you talking about? What are you even talking about? Finally, the director admitted. He said, well, you said you said transphobic things. I was like, how is what I said transphobic? I said, uh, I this is national policy now. And they didn't care. And I was walked out of the building. It was really very distressing. I loved my job. I loved the work that I did. Working in human services is not supposed to end like this.
The timeline was pretty interesting too, because DK had just volunteered for the board of
Just,
Jill.
yeah, yeah.
And so I didn't really know her very well. She seemed like this professional person, knew a lot about publishing, was clearly in the lesbian world, knew her way around. And I thought, this is great. And then she sort of casually mentioned that she just lost her job. And I thought, wow, she's pretty calm about the whole thing. I think you must have still been in shock a little bit. But
Yeah.
also, I think just in some ways, I mean, how awful for you, but in some ways, the magazine sort of came along right at the right time because you just jumped right in and it sort of consumed the next several months of your life.
There was
Yeah.
healing that I had to go through. That was really traumatic.
So Jill Magazine, entertaining and healing. Get your copy today.
Entertaining and healing, exactly. And it really is. I think there's on multiple levels, not just for those of us who create it, but hopefully for the readers too.
Yeah, and I that's quite a story you have, DK, and I know I hear for a lot of people who had to go through a similar sort of, cancellation experience, for lack of better term, they often will say how important it is that they found other people, other like-minded people, and particularly if they're lesbians, finding other lesbians who are on their side. And I think absolutely something like Jill Magazine can play an important role in that.
And there's something sort of interesting about, a print magazine that you hold in your hand and you look at the pictures, as opposed to there's so much online, of course, both DK and I, and I'm sure Ariane, you too, belong to a variety of Facebook groups and Twitter chats and whatnot. But it's different, right? It's still people seem so far away, and somehow having something hard copy still far away, but kind of brings it a little bit closer. It's not in the screen, it's in your hands, and you can sit there with a coffee or a tea or a wine or a beer or water or whatever you're into drinking, and page through it and just read these stories. And we try to include contact information for all our contributors. Some people do write anonymously, but other folks have websites or Substacks or, Instagram accounts or whatnot. We always try to include that so that if you're reading somebody's piece and you liked it, you can reach out to them and make a new friend if you want.
Plus, you don't need Wi-Fi to read it.
You mentioned that you tried to do this, Vera, I think of bringing the physical magazine to a group just to see how it would fit. I mean, you never know. You could, like here where I live, some people have their own, little library, those little in front
Oh
of
yeah,
their
the
house,
little free libraries.
a free
Absolutely.
library.
I put two of them. I actually run a little free library in Mexico, in a small town in Mexico over the winter. And people are always putting in like their Seventh-day Adventists and, Jehovah's Witness tracks in there. So I cut through a couple of Jill magazines in there last winter and they all found homes. So hopefully they went to
I have
women.
I have heard that in certain groups in the country, one copy is being passed around amongst the group. I think I've heard that on 2 or 3 occasions, which is kind of great. It's kind of like the way it should be.
Yeah, and the other thing, like when with the first issue, what we tried to do is say, okay, order one copy for $30, or you can get two copies for $50 and keep one and drop the other one off at the local library or in a little free library or at a cafe or whatever, because my hope with the magazine, in addition to reaching, intentional readers, is also to reach readers, unintentionally or subversively or subconsciously or in a more nuanced way, because if I had been sitting in a restaurant or a cafe when I was in my early 20s and I had seen a magazine like this, might have saved a lot of heartbreak for a lot of people, because I was very gay. I just didn't know it at the time, so that's kind of our hope, both for, young women or even older women who may be questioning their sexuality, but also for lesbians who have not yet peaked, because it's, in my mind, a gentle introduction. We're not clobbering people over the head with it. We're being very clear and firm, and honest in our content. But it is, there's a lot of just fun fluff in there as well. And like I said, a great centerfold. So there's just a lot there. Among other things, the story of how maybe the Kool-Aid you've drunk isn't all that. And there's other perspectives to that. So we hope to reach readers also who are not yet peaked. This isn't just for previously peaked lesbians. It's for all lesbians. And some of them may not change their mind when they read it, and that's fine too. We're not here to convert anyone. We're here to just entertain and tell women's stories.
You've alluded to some of this, like you want to get some more international contributions. Are there other sort of types of content that you'd like to see more of, maybe for a future edition?
Well, I think photos are very popular. That's the feedback we got from the first edition. And we do have more photos this time around, but you know, in order to publish photos, we need people to send photos. So if you're a lesbian in a relationship, send pictures of you and your lesbian family. If you're a single lesbian, send photos. Maybe we'll find you another lesbian out there to shack up with if that's what you're looking for. Might take a year, but you know, that sort of thing. If you're a lesbian who rides a bike or flies an airplane or drives a truck or teaches or whatever, send us pictures and tell us your story. And so that kind of thing, I think we want more of. The other thing we'd really like to see, and you know, DK and I have talked about this, I don't know how realistic it is, but we'd love to at some point get into advertising. We don't want a lot of advertising because we don't want the magazine overrun with ads, but we would love to have one or two or maybe even three paid sponsors, because right now everything is voluntary. So DK and I have spent hours and hours and hours on this. At some point, she will probably be going back to work full time, and we'll have to think about what that looks like, you know, when you can't set aside 4 months of your life full time to work on getting a magazine out. So obviously, you know, we'll have other volunteers too, but the actual layout and the publication process is fairly intensive. And so if we can't do it with volunteer labor, we would have to pay somebody to do that. So if we had advertisers, you know, that would cover that. Would also offset the cost a bit for readers. And we'd love at some point to be able to pay our writers, our contributors, our photographers, and ourselves, you know, a small honorarium, nothing big, but geez, you know, you should be able to go out for supper after you've written a 4-page piece for a magazine, right? So we love that people submit stuff, and it's great that we have so many volunteers, but we also recognize the need to, I think, value the time of various artists and writers, and we'd love to be able to do that. So advertising would help with that. So if anybody's watching this or listening to it, and either has a business themselves that may be of interest or knows of a business that may like a very focused lesbian audience, you know, reach out. We do have space for advertising, not in this next issue, but in future issues. We would be very open to that, half page, full page, whatever. And you know, it'd be great to have a sponsor to help with that.
Right. As long as it sort of meshes
Aligned.
with our
As long as it
editorial
aligns with the
vision.
philosophy, right? Just like your workplace.
Exactly. Oh,
So,
God.
yeah.
Yeah.
But we would, absolutely. And that's a really good point, even with contributors. So we welcome all submissions, but at the end of the day, the editorial board obviously reserves the right just to make sure that the content is in alignment with our goals. You know, obviously, if there was some anti-feminist piece written by a dude, you know, thanks, but no thanks, we probably wouldn't publish it. But other than that, you know, we are very open and open to all contributions and submissions, and people can send them anytime. And if, you know, we're just past one issue, we just put them in a folder for the next issue, and then we'll consider them when we get back into that cycle for future.
And just to clarify, are your submissions, are you required to be a lesbian to make submissions?
No, as long as you are a woman, i.e. female. So
Okay.
just to clarify, in case that's not clear.
Right.
So you must be female. Obviously, you know, I think all of our content for this issue is written and contributed by lesbians. There might be one or two small pieces that are female allies, but it is all female. So you do have to be a female, ideally a lesbian, but if you're just female, that's okay. We'll take it.
One side benefit that has come out of this is I have gotten to go to Canada. I'd only ever been to the Pacific Northwest when I was a lot younger, but it's not too bad of a drive. And I really screwed up my courage and got my passport and headed north. And I've gone up, what, 3 times now?
Yeah, including DK is actually one of our photographers for the centerfold. So
You hear so often women saying, we don't meet in public anymore. So, and they want to find each other. I read about this all the time on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. Women are trying to find, women, particularly those who have peaked, are trying to find each other so they have community, because most of us, self included, have lost most of our friends once we've peaked, the vast majority of them. And
in person, you mean? You're in person?
yeah, in-person relationships have been badly battered. So coming up to Canada has been, I met people and expanded my community of people. And that also was part of the healing for me, was to get out of my head and get out of where I live for a little bit and go get some work done.
That would be a fun challenge for a future issue, DK. We should encourage people to meet each other, meet other readers, and then send in photos and stories about that for
That
the
is
next.
such a great idea.
And that does sound like a great idea. And we've been thinking about like how can we do more, in-person stuff. I guess I was just thinking you two were just doing stuff online. I didn't know that you went all the way to Canada. That's really
Mostly, yeah, mostly it's been online, but there are a few things like just this past weekend we met in Montreal and actually went over the layout in person because, there's online is good, but there is something very different about sitting side by side at the same computer screen and making changes in real time. Hugely beneficial.
Plus, I got to have like really good food up in Montreal and
Also
see
that.
things I'd never seen before.
Yeah, I mean, just listening to this conversation, it's really highlighting how much work you all are putting into this magazine, and I really am in awe of that. I mean, I was impressed when I got the first edition. I thought, wow, this is all like glossy and shiny. I was expecting something that like, I could have, a very amateur
A
like print job at the
newsletter
local
print,
coffee shop.
yeah.
Mimeograph machine, right? Exactly.
Yeah,
And this next one's going to be even more impressive, I think. So,
Yeah, and Ariane, it's really good to hear you say that because I think, some people were a little bit put off by the price of the first issue. It was, we asked $30. We did have some discounted issues for, people, women who wanted them or needed that. Um, but again, we're not making money off this. It's, you saw the quality of it. And so it costs a certain amount to print and then to ship, of course, as well. So the next version or this next issue, we are actually looking into sort of drop shipping. So there won't be that. It'll be a little bit more hands-off, which is kind of sad, but also a lot less work, which means we can just send out a link to anybody on our mailing list, our email list, and they can go directly and order a copy and pay whatever it costs to ship locally. But I do want to say one thing that I did mention earlier about getting the magazine out. I mean, here you are talking to us face to face online, but there's so much behind the scenes stuff that happens too, right? So yes, we have a lot of contributors and some of them are anonymous, or right under a pseudonym. But there's also financial contributors. Like we had a few women for the first issue who donated significantly, like $100, or there was one who gave over $500. And that was really helpful in launching things, not just emotionally, like, oh, wow, somebody actually supports us and believes in it. Okay, I can do it. But also practically, right? Because for the first issue in particular, I had to front the cash. And so to have women who just wanted one or two copies themselves, but who had the money and who believed that this was an important cause to give a little bit extra to actually get it off the ground and kickstart it was super helpful. And it allowed us to offer some copies at a reduced cost. So instead of $15 or $30, people could buy one for $10 or $15. And we had quite a few women avail themselves of that. Not everybody's employed or, if they're young, they're still in school, they don't have a bunch of extra money. And so we'd like to be able to do that again. So if there are readers out there or listeners out there who really believe in this and have a few extra dollars kicking around and want to make a donation, our GoFundMe link is still live. And so we use that, to cover postage or pay for, and we'll pay that forward. So even once these issues are gone for the next issue, if we have, extra money that comes in through donations, we can certainly offer a few discounted issues or even comps for lesbians in need. Everybody should have a copy of Jill, finances notwithstanding. So that's also been really helpful.
great to know. Yeah, this is a great opportunity to really give back to the lesbian community. And I'm so excited about this next edition. Is there anything else you want to share?
If you're not already on our mailing list, you can email us through our website and just let us know you want to get on the mailing list. And so as soon as we have a plan with the printer, of course, we'll put that all over our social media accounts in Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. But we'll also email you personally and say, okay, the next issue is ready to go. Here's where you find it. And here's where you can order a copy. And so there'll be a direct link and people can just order 1 or 5 or however many copies they want. So stay tuned for that, but get on our mailing list if you want the latest up-to-date info.
Great. And hopefully by the time this interview is released, that will be imminent. So,
Absolutely.
well, thank you so much, you two, for first of all doing all this work on this project. It's an incredible magazine. I encourage anyone listening to make sure you buy a next copy. And you say there still might be some edition one available as
Yeah,
well.
we have a few copies left.
Okay.
DK, how many do you have there in the States? Like 10
I
or
think
something?
I have about 10. Yeah, we
Yeah.
found a stash that we didn't know about fairly recently. 10 left in the States, and you have what?
And 8. I think I have 8 here in Canada. So
Right.
get
So
them while they're hot. Once they're gone, they're
yeah,
gone.
once they're gone, they won't be reprinted. Yeah, exactly.
But then the next issue will be coming soon.
So not too late to get a volume 1 and volume 2 coming soon. Please get edition, buy multiple so that you can share with your extended social networks that you can leave in your free libraries or whatever. I think that's a great way to share this. And we'll leave all the information in the show notes, as well as, like I said, the first interview we did with Vera. So on that note, thank you, both of you two, and thank you everyone who's watching this. Be sure to like and subscribe and share this interview so that other people know about Jill Magazine.
Thank you so much, Ariane, for the opportunity. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.